We're here to talk about education and employment. And before we get started, I want to remind all of you in the audience that you can participate. We'd love you to participate, so make sure you send in your questions using the QR code on the back of your badge. And we do have a school principal here, so he will get upset if you don't pay attention and you don't answer
it's time for everyone to put their phones down and start paying attention.
There you go. We have a principal here, so you have been warned.
Yeah.
So education and employment, two things that were really affected terribly and acutely by the pandemic. And I'm going to begin with you, Nick. I mean, it's important to talk about this because we really have to think about how we can best prepare the youth of today to contribute actively to the workforce for tomorrow, which has changed dramatically. So let me begin by asking you, is there a gap between education and employment today, and where is that gap?
Great question, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and engage in this important conversation with Sal and yourself. The gap is very real. I think all of us in the room recognise that. We are seeing the headlines with things like the Great Resignation, quiet quitting. We are seeing 75% of employers saying, I cannot find the talent I need that have the right combination of technical skills and human capabilities. And the gap isn't just around the skills and capabilities. The gap is around what students, workers, employers are looking for, expect and desire out of work. I mean, the LinkedIn data and research is showing that less than 20% of job postings today are for remote jobs, but more than 50% of applications are for those remote jobs. So a clear signal that there's a disconnect. The thing that I think is most perplexing when we think about bridging this gap right from early education through to the workforce is what we are seeing around the importance of the potential and passion in our students and workers. Deloitte recently did research around a skill-based organisation approach, and we had only 18% of business leaders and only 26% of workers say that they are currently utilising the skills and capabilities of their workforce to their fullest potential. So I think what we need to be thinking about is how do we bridge this transition from education to the workforce in a way where we are unleashing that potential, not just at entry, but moving forward for sustainability.
Of course, and I want to talk about the potential aspect in a minute. But before that, Sal, you run the Green School here in Bali. It's a young school, but in the few years that it's been around, it's developed a phenomenal global reputation. And I personally know families from around the world who have decided to send their children here. What does your school do differently?
Well, primarily, we're closing that gap that we're talking about now. We've been able to create a new model of education outside of a traditional model of education where we know that the world is changing so fast, exponentially fast, with increasingly complex challenges for the future. And I'm talking about children walking into the future here. We're in an amazing room with some amazing change makers here, but if education isn't a part of moving together forward, we're not going to get anywhere. So we've been able to create a different model of education that involves skill-based, values-based learning. It involves learning for now and being able to do something with your learning now, rather than just learn for an exam, to activate your learning and to embed skills, life skills and values into our young future leaders of this planet, to be able to make a difference to the world now with their learning, but to move into the future as a change maker. Sorry, but the old education system, and probably this room's a little bit different, the old education system educated change takers.
Not change makers.
Yeah, cultures that accepted change upon them. The future is going to demand our youth of today, the adults of the future, to be able to make change in their life, in their companies' lives, in their families' lives, in their governments' lives. There is no moving forward together without having education in the room.
But Sal, it's it's a great idea to say we want to create change makers, right? How do you do that on a daily basis in school. What are you doing to ensure that the kids who graduate from the Green School are at least equipped to be change makers?
I'm just going to hold the stage.
No, I'm coming back to you in a minute,
First of
don't
all,
worry.
when I went to school, I was taught a lot of information. We were probably all taught a lot of information. With that information, we were asked to memorise it and then regurgitate it for an exam. And that was apparently an education system. That was apparently your learning journey to go out into the real world.
Yeah, the rote learning, we've all been there.
So there was a completely different place now if you haven't looked outside, you know, in terms of information, technology, climate challenges, societies and everything like that. You can embed skills and values-based learning into any age group learning experience and get the same normal knowledge-based learning outcomes at the end. Mm-hmm. So instead of doing, right now I'm missing an event called Sustainable Solutions at Green School Bali. And it's an event that our high school students create, curate, and then hold workshops, facilitated workshops, activities, all sorts of awesome sustainability initiatives run by students. And the learning that goes into preparing for an event like this, bigger than an event like this. Mm-hmm. Trust me, there's going to be 1,000 people at Green School Bali today celebrating sustainability. That's real learning, and they can learn all sorts of skills and values.
Let's talk about the pandemic for a moment, because God knows that's had a huge impact on the way we work. So Nick, I want to come to you with that. What is the lasting impact of the pandemic on the future of work? There have been so many. I mean, you touched upon it earlier, remote working is one. But let me ask you this. I mean, if there was one change that you hope will stay forever, what is that one change?
Putting the human dimension at the center of everything and anything we are thinking about around work, workforces, workplaces.
So how should that happen? How can an employer make sure that that's what they do?
Paying attention to the fact that the pandemic has created a moment for workers to reevaluate what's important to them in their lives, what that means to what they need, expect and desire out of their work. So, for example, we have 40% of the workforce looking to change jobs. We have 53% of women more stressed now than they were a year ago. We have 48% of millennials saying, we are ready to leave our jobs. We are burned out. There are things more important to us. So I think this is a moment where we need to really drive collective action between government, private sector, civil society, and say, how are we going together to bridge this gap around what businesses need, as well as what workers are telling us that they're looking for moving forward. Putting humans at the centre, looking beyond just, for example, what workers have done in the past, their accomplishments. How do we look beyond that and say, as Sal was saying, how can these individuals contribute to the long term, those human capabilities, the ability to learn, unlearn, the ability to tackle and resolve those wicked problems ahead of us today. Everything about putting that human dimension at the centre by design, which I think is something that hasn't always been the way we lead the way as we're thinking about preparing for the future.
And you could just take the word work away and substitute it with education for everything Nick just said.
Education was turned on its head, right? Because of the pandemic. We had kids out of school for months in certain parts of the world. Yes, exactly. So what do you think will be the lasting impact of the pandemic on education? What did we lose? What sort of worries you about that? And what was the opportunity? What's good about it?
Yeah, I think you never miss your water till your well runs dry. And we in education, in schools, missed community. We missed that human essence of education. We missed the opportunity for students collectively to be together, to learn together. Learning sitting at home. I bet you there's a whole heap of parents here that became the teachers of their students, and they got an insight into an education system that's been in a time capsule for 100 years.
I did,
Probably
it was not
sitting
easy.
there at home. How many people sitting there at home and going, wow, I learnt the same thing when I was a kid. Did you ask yourself, why are they still learning the same thing when the world is a completely different place?
Yeah.
Isn't education, the purpose of it is to prepare children to be adults in the future? So doesn't the future then dictate the education systems that need to be created.
Absolutely.
So we miss that. We miss that community essence. We miss that collaborative, collective thinking, problem solving. We miss being together. We miss being in nature. Green School Bali is a beautiful natural campus. But we learnt a lot through COVID. We learnt how students learn best. People are learning differently all of the time. They're learning online, okay, but they're learning together at home with their families. You know, education for us, and I think Green School Bali was able to get through COVID by realising that it was skills and it was values rather than knowledge that was getting us through not just a pandemic, but getting us through a really difficult time in education.
I'm going to request you all to keep your phones handy because I'm going to come to a polling question in just a moment. But before that, Nick,
We'll mark you on we'll take grades on the participation.
That's right, you know, very few A's being handed out here. Nick, I want to go back to your idea about a student's potential, right? Now, gauging somebody's potential, that's not something you can see on a CV. So is the CV still relevant?
The CV can still be relevant. However, we need to be using it to ask new questions for this new world of perpetual disruption, expecting and assuming that what we're looking for and needing today will inevitably change tomorrow, 2 years, 3 years and beyond. In Deloitte's 2021 Global Human Capital Trends Research, executives told us their number one priority to navigate future disruptions was the ability of their people to adapt, reskill and assume new roles. So I like to think about it as we are looking at every candidate as if they are an accomplished athlete in one sport. And we are looking at their suitability for the Olympic team, but we don't know what sport they're going to compete in. So we are not as interested in how many championships or gold medals do they bring today. We are looking for things like their work ethic, their training discipline, that ability to learn, unlearn, to team, to lead within a team setting. These are the new questions that we need to be asking for in looking at the CV today. So provided we are looking at the CV with that lens of future forward thinking, I think it has a really important role to play. It's the mindset on what are we using it for that really is the differentiator.
Sal, to prepare students that somebody like Nick wants to employ, you know, the student who is versatile, who's adaptable, who's nimble, that's well and good, but at the same time, and as a parent myself, I still want my kids to know calculus, and I still want my kids to know, I don't know how handy that is actually, but you know,
I don't know. I'm a maths teacher in calculus.
Yeah, okay, so maybe not calculus, but I want them to learn, you know, to still have a regular curriculum. So how do you blend that at the Green School, that they have a regular curriculum, but you're also working on creating the workforce that somebody like Nick wants?
Yeah, we do have a really highly developed curriculum that has a lot of components that are traditional in terms of mathematics and literacy and the sciences. So it's really about designing diverse learner pathways. The students can do calculus and they can do organic chemistry and things like that, but they can also jump into different project-based learning opportunities. I think project-based learning in general is something that combines integrated opportunities to learn different things, knowledge, skills, and values. You know, when we're talking about skills too, I was just thinking, I mean, it's all about skill-based learning. That's how you do it. You need to integrate skill-based learning, but these aren't new skills that we're talking about. You know, we're talking about collaboration, communication, creativity, adaptability. You know, it's funny that we have to actually start talking about these now because those skills are why we're here today. You know, holding a mic live around the world, flying around the world everywhere. These skills aren't new to human society and the human being itself. Somehow they just got forgotten in terms of an education system. So we've been really sort of resetting the button around what's needed for the future. And what's needed for the future are those skills: critical thinking, collaboration, adaptability. You just embed experiences that bring those skills to light in a student. You know, they're innate human skills. That's why we climbed out of the trees and got out of the caves. It's why we're such a successful species on this planet. It's time to educate for those skills, because that's the way forward for a sustainable future.
Let's go to our poll now, if we can bring that up.
This is interesting.
This should be interesting.
And the winner is?
So yes, let's, the one who's getting an A is who's the eager beaver. So let's get our polling question up. And it's about the workforce of the future. You can use the QR code that you're seeing right now to, there you go. And the question is, the workforce of the future needs ESG knowledge, to be nimble and adaptable, a clear taxonomy to work within, or early education on sustainability. We're going to give it a few seconds just for the results to settle down. And there we go, 65% say to be nimble and adaptable is most important. I actually think, I'm surprised that no one has picked a clear taxonomy to work with, because sometimes I think you do need a framework to know what you're expected to do. Okay, I'm going to let you all react. Nick, to be nimble and adaptable, is that what you expected?
Well, the first thing I would ask our audience is, put your hand up if you had to think twice about what one of these matters most. Because my expectation is that all of these are important to all of us. And there will be some days when some of them are more important to us than others. But most of us are trying to tackle all of these things at once every single day, trying to think about that bridge between education and employability. And so for me, I'm rather interested that the audience has really, pulled on that nimble and adaptable, perhaps, as I said, similar to what we saw in our human capital trends research, that if we had to choose one thing, it is that adaptability. But for me, you can see ESG is still important, early education is still important. And so for me, we must recognise that just because nimble and adaptable may have more of the audience votes here, doesn't take away the fact that we all need to tackle these all at once together. And that, again, don't want to sound like a broken record, but that's where it's that multilateral system that's so critical. Every one of these things that we see here needs that collective action between the government, private sector and civil society. How about you, Sal? Does this surprise you?
No, it's pretty cool. I think, when I deal in adaptability and I help teams of teachers create opportunities for students to develop resilience and adaptability. And, when I look at that, I think probably people have thought and looked at adaptability in terms of a holistic sense of where you don't just sort of adapt to something. You don't just, oh, great, I've adapted. You've got to go through a series of using a series of different skills, whether it's, critical thinking, again, a collaboration. We're going to adapt to something. We don't just instantly adapt. So, it seems to me that being nimble, agile and being able to move quickly and change direction, but how you change direction, how you go about adapting is very important to me. Sustainability, I'll just say, if sustainability isn't part of how global organisations, how government education systems and how international independent school education isn't, if sustainability isn't a core value within all of those educations, we're not going to get to a sustainable future.
Now, Gen Z, millennials, they have a different idea about success, right? I'm pretty sure salary isn't at the top of their list. So this is a question for both of you, because you are dealing with the youth. What is at the top of their list?
I love this question. We often think right now salary is not at the top of the list. It's very complex. So let me tell you what we know about what is important. So in Deloitte's recent 2022 Gen Z and Millennial survey, Millennials and Gen Zs told us they're deeply concerned about the state of the world. We know things like climate, things like aligning their personal values are becoming important. They told us that increasingly important is their mental health, their well-being. But they told us the number one issue on their mind in general right now is financial stability. 30% said they're living paycheck to paycheck and they are stressed about covering their living expenses. But let me show you how this plays out in terms of the choices they're making about employers that they're choosing and employers that they're leaving. The choices Gen Zs and millennials are making to leave an employer, they told us the number one reason is pay. The number two reason is mental health. The number three reason is burnout. Very different to the choices they're making about what employer do I want to go and join. Number one, work-life balance. Number two, learning and development opportunities. And number three, pay. So pay has become table stakes. And if we are thinking that offering very generous financial incentives is going to be enough to attract Gen Z and millennial, right now, most likely not. We're going to need more. So I think we need to be understanding there is a nuance between what is important in life more broadly. Financial stability is absolutely critical. And then how that translates to the choices being made about will I leave my employer and will I join this new employer?
We do have some great questions that have come in from the audience. And Sal, here's a really good one for you. How can the innovative practices at the Green School be democratized and scaled to work for the poorest of the poor?
Yeah, awesome question. Look, we know there's two major problems in education right now, and one's the access to education. Gender equity and access is definitely one, and probably just, the need to reset and update, revolutionise education. Well, what we've had the opportunity at Green School over 14 years is to create a whole new model outside of limitations and restrictions, and a lot of what we do can be scaled within any type of school. I mean, I'll give you an example, a case example. Our school has created its own recycling centre as a part of the learning program. Imagine if every school in Denpasar or every school in New Delhi had created its own recycling program, where the school actually learns by doing and creating recycling systems within its community. So one, that's an easy one. Let's think about waste, let's think about water, let's think about energy, let's think about access to all of those things and embed them into a learning program wherever you are, whatever school. Why do we keep teaching the same thing over and over again to a group of, our future leaders that are going to go out into the world and go, where are we now? You can actually scale basically everything that Green School Bali's created into any type of school model.
And there's one more great question which had just come up, and that one's for you, Nick. And the question had said that earlier in the year, we were talking about the great resignation, quiet quitting. In the last few weeks, we've seen some of the biggest companies in the world, have mass layoffs. What's your reading into this? What's going on?
I think a lot of employers right now are a little bit anxious about some of the instability we're seeing in the market and are looking at some of these quick decisions. What I often turn my mind to is, what about those 97 million new jobs that the World Economic Forum told us are going to be created by 2025 with humans, machines, and algorithms working together? What do we need to do today, regardless of what is ahead of us in terms of the financial instability? We need to be thinking today about what we need to do to weather the storms of possible recessions and make sure that we are positioned and everybody is positioned to succeed and thrive in the green and digital economies, because our need to do that isn't going away. So I feel we need to more look at how do we use the current labour market dynamics and challenges as an opportunity to look for new ways to tackle some of these other concerns we have around the financial instability.
We have 1 minute left, so 30 seconds. One question for both of you. Sal, your vision for the classroom of the future.
Fun, engaging, connected to nature, meaningful, high-tech, low-tech, connected to your community, with parents, organisations, companies from all around the community, all around the world engaged in a learning program.
I want to go back to school again.
Come and see me at Green School Bali. We've got a new model. You'll love it.
Nick, your vision for the workforce of the future.
It would have to be humans at the centre to pave the path for a future that is sustainable, equitable and inclusive for all.
Nick, Sal, thank you very much for your time and for joining us. Thank you
you
all
very
for
much,
being a
everyone.
great
Thank you.
audience.
Everyone.